want to talk about the vision of your life. I love the way your pastor defined it. He talked about vision, painting this thing. I loved it because I want to give you a vision of what guest services is all about. One of the things I get to do at our church is kind of paint a picture for guest services. I love it because we get to create this atmosphere where people come in, they don't even know what it is, but they're like, this is awesome. They really, it's like you walk into Disneyland. It's like, oh, this is amazing. Because we're architects of atmosphere. And an atmosphere of expectation is a breeding ground for miracles. We get the opportunity to create this atmosphere of expectation where people come in like, I don't even know what it is, but I'm falling in love with God. People can't even explain it, but they're looking at you going, I don't know what it is, but I need what you got. Because they're hollow and they're empty inside. How can the church become so personal you're moved into action and you do something about it? I want to talk about the vision of this church. Can it become so personal it causes your feet to move? Can it become so personal you become arrested with it and you can't sleep the night before because of what you believe God's going to do tomorrow? So I want to make the vision of the church become very personal because I love the vision of your pastor. 50,000 people? That's ridiculous, y'all. That's like throw up in your mouth kind of scary goal. Like, really, God? Really? Because the reality is when God's spoken to that, for him to say it to you, he's like, really, God? Well, really? What if it don't work out? He's the one that's got to hear God. But he believes that's the vision of this church. What a great vision. What a great compelling story to say, guys, let's aggressively seek and save that which is lost. Let's run after it. But if it doesn't become about a person, you'll never take it personal. So let me ask you this question. So rather than it being about a bunch of people, let me make it be about a personal. And if you have your phone or if you have notes, I want you to write this down or text a name or make a mental note if you have nothing to write down with. I want you to think about this. Who is close to you but far from God? Who is close to you but far from God? Who's in your relational networks but they're outside the love of Christ? Who's in your spheres of influence but outside of the authority of Jesus? Who used to be maybe walking close with God, but they have wandered so far away and they're stuck in the mud? Who's the person that if they died today, they spend eternity separated from him? Do you have a name? Do you have a face? And so when I do this exercise, when I think about this, I always write down the name Luann. She's my sister. I'm one of 5 kids. I grew up in a really small town in Minnesota called Sleepy Eye. And if you've ever watched a Little House on the Prairie, you've heard of it. Because Walnut Grove is really there and Sleepy Eye is really there. A farming family. We were so poor we didn't know we were poor. One of 5 kids, Lonnie, Luann, Leslie, Larry, and Lance. Now why my mom and dad did that, that's jacked up. But it was beautiful because by the time your mom got the right name, you're out of the room. So it's all good. It was a blessing in it. But my sister grew up pretty rough. She had 4 brothers. We were all pretty aggressive. We were all full of testosterone, running around crazy. But we also grew up in a home that my dad repeated what he was given as a kid. So my dad grew up in a home with an alcoholic dad and a very abusive dad. So my dad decided to recreate in my life what he had in his life. So we grew up in a home that was filled with alcoholism and physical abuse and verbal abuse. It was pretty typical on any given day that one of the kids getting smacked or mom's getting beaten. And it was a very difficult home to be in. And some of you know that home because you've been in that home. And it's not a fun place. So my sister spent her whole life running from where she was. Anywhere is better than here. And a calling from God is not running from something, it's running to something. Some of you need to hear that. That might be the only thing you need to catch tonight. You've been running from something your whole life. And God's here to remind you, stop running and start living. And my sister spent her whole life running from there because anywhere is better than there. But 8 months ago, the divorce papers were filed with her and her husband. She's older than me, a couple years older. And her 12-year-old daughter, her name is Kaylin, she's my niece. She calls me and she says, Uncle Larry, I think it's my fault that mom and dad are getting divorced. I think it's my fault that mom and dad argue all the time. I think it's my fault that they can't get along. Maybe if I were just a better daughter, this wouldn't be going on. And the whole world my sister was running from, she's recreating. And it's a train that's going downhill, it has no brakes, and it is ugly. And so when I think about somebody who's close to me but far from God, I always think about my sister. And in our church, we teach all of the volunteers what we call our one-day principle. Say one day. Say it. That is so much better. One day. One day is simply this. If this were the one day she were going to come to church, what would she get? If this were the one day she were going to come to church, who would I pray that she meet? Now, if this were the one day she were going to come to church, who were the people I pray that she does not meet? Right? Because it's when your sister, you take it real personally, like, oh, don't talk to her because they're like obnoxious. Right? Seriously. Because there are some people in church that like, they got to like explain like she's really a nice person. She just can't sing real good. You got to like apologize to Here you don't have to apologize for the music. Here you don't have to apologize for the preaching. You've got amazing stuff happening each and every week that you don't have to apologize for. But what if this were that person's one day? Now you think about your person and the name you wrote down. What if this were the one day they were going to come to church? What would you want them to experience? To what lengths would you go to make sure they have an awesome experience? I want to talk about a one day, a place of one day. Pastor Rick shared a story about a guy who drove through the parking lot, and that was his one day. That's the saddest story I've heard in a long time. But we can either feel bad about that story or we can do something about it. We can either use it as something to feel bad about or we can use it as fuel to propel us forward. So one day is an incredible place. And so if my sister were going to come to this church, here's what I think I'd do. Here's what I know I'd do because I've been praying for it for 19 years. I've been praying for her life to be changed for 19 years. I don't think I would sleep the night before. I would be up all night praying and casting out all kinds of demons, knowing stuff at Crisco, not even knowing what I'm doing. Why? Because she's coming tomorrow. I've been praying for her for 19 years, and tomorrow's the day. I wouldn't sleep. I'd be up all night like Christmas times 100. Why? Because tomorrow's the day her life might be changed. Tomorrow's the day her sins might be forgiven. Tomorrow's the day the wrongs of life might be made right in a moment because Jesus becomes the center of it. And I'd be praying that hunk of junk car start tomorrow because her husband's too cheap to buy her a reliable vehicle. I'm just telling like it is. I'd be praying that they made the light bill payment because he's pretty forgetful and doesn't take good care of his money and he squanders it away a lot. I'd be praying that they don't get in a fist fight the morning of as they're trying to get dressed to come to church. I'd be praying that they don't get so consumed with the bad habits of the day, they make their daughter sit in the back seat and cry all the way to church. And I get to the building early, and I got keys, so I'll let myself in. And I'm going to pray over every single seat in this auditorium. Because this might be the one where she gets her life changed. That one might be the seat where all of her sins are forgiven. Maybe that's the one where her marriage is restored. Maybe that's the one where her daughter gives her life to Christ. I don't know what seat she's going to sit in, so I'm going to pray over every single one of them. Because here's what you've got to understand with the gifts that God has given you. When the calling is significant, there's nothing insignificant. Everything matters for the cause of Christ. And if my sister's come into this place, I'm praying over every single seat in this auditorium because I'm going to leave nothing to chance. I'm going to bring it all to the table because she's got so much guilt and so much shame. Which is the one seat? Maybe this is the one where it's all washed away. How about your person? What are you going to do? And I'm going to go to the parking team. Any parking team people in here? Any parking members? Parking team? Anybody? A couple of you? Thank you. I love you. If I could volunteer in one place in the church, I'd volunteer in the parking lot. Why? Because how many times do you forget your car where you park it? When you can make the mundane memorable, you've been magnificent. I am serious. I get just as many phone calls about and emails about the parking team as I do just about anything else. Because you can so connect with people. Because you're not just parking cars. You are the first face of Christ. You are the first ambassador of Jesus. You represent the vision of this house. You are the one who gets the ability to look through glass and by your very smile change the countenance on their face. Because most people driving in this place, what does their face look like? Are they happy? Nope. We call it the 900-foot miracle. It's about 900 feet from the front to where their seat's going to be. The 900-foot miracle is this. Can I change their countenance in 900 feet where they go from being upset and angry to smiling and content? We got 900 feet to change their complete attitude, their complete countenance. Every single step between here and there is significant. Because the reality is if they walk in this place grumpy, it's a whole bigger obstacle to overcome. I know God can raise people from the dead. Everything is possible, but we have a responsibility. Our responsibility is to create an atmosphere that changes their countenance from discouragement to fulfillment. How can I in 900 feet communicate by my physical presence, by me looking at you, by me engaging you, communicate that you have worth and you have value, and I'm so glad you're here today. Because my sister is arguing in the car with her husband as they pull up to the parking lot, and they see your smiling face like, what? This is a little bit different. I've never seen anything like this before. This is crazy. But the parking team is looking through the glass, and he's smiling, and he's waving, and he's saying, come on in. And she's like, wow. And if more than 4 or 5 cars get backed up, she's going to turn around and go home because she's got the attention span of a gnat. Some of you sitting here right now are realizing, I am not maximizing what God has given me. I am capable of so much more because I'm still waiting for something to happen out there. But God is saying, create it here today. When you show up a place of one day, a place of potential and possibility, you see things happen. You just walk into a room expecting someone to get saved. I know someone's going to get saved. Is it going to be them? Is it going to be them? Which one is it? Because when you are serving in this house, you need to ask yourself the question, am I serving with a one-day attitude or another day attitude? Because if you show up serving, it's just another day to greet. Hi. How you doing? You want to hang out? Here's a worship guide. You need a pen? It's over there. And when you settle into just another day serving, you give people your leftovers rather than giving God your best. And some of you know that you're capable of so much more. No matter what you've been giving, let me call you to a higher standard. Let your standard be what Jesus gave, and you'll always find more. You've always got more to give. Another day versus one day. One day is a place where anything can happen. One day is a place where someone's going to get saved. One day is sometimes you got to stand outside the building and you got to preach to yourself, say, okay, God, I don't feel like it today, but I'm not walking in that building until I feel you in my spirit. And I'm going to preach to myself, and I'm going to preach myself to a place where I expect you to move, even though I can't see it around me. I'm going to close my eyes and believe it because they deserve it. My sister deserves better. Your dad deserves better, and God expects more from you. When you can create an attitude of one day, because in the volunteer forces, what would it look like if you start high-fiving? It's like, today it's somebody's one day. Today somebody's one day. Somebody's going to get changed today. Somebody's going to get moved today. When you can create an attitude of expectation and anticipation, it is the breeding ground of miracles. It's funny. I was talking to Shannon earlier, one of the worship leaders, and she had this beautiful color eyeshadow on that was matching her shirt. I could tell she picked it out. I can tell she took hours matching everything, standing in front of the mirror, matching it all. Is she in here? I don't know where she went. But it was funny. And I simply said, I love your eyeshadow. And she got mad and she punched me. No, she didn't. She said, wow, thank you for noticing. Because when you can notice something, it means you're important to me. If this is just check the box like, okay, I looked at you. But can you actually look at somebody and communicate with my eyes and say, I value you. I'm so thankful for you today. Can you be the kind of person that notices when people's hair color changes? I notice it all the time at Elevation. When I notice hair, and you should see what happens when you acknowledge, like, because here's the thing. It happened last weekend. There was one of our volunteers. She serves in our place that serves food to all of our volunteers. And I simply walked up and said, I could tell she was having a bad day. I could tell life was hard because her daughter just got out of rehab and she relapsed. But she didn't need me to walk up and say, I'm so sorry about your daughter. Because everybody across the whole campus is saying that. I simply said, I love your new hair color. She was, I can't believe you noticed. My husband didn't even notice. Why? Because here's the reality. She felt like she didn't matter and nobody noticed her. When people feel insignificant, like nobody even notices them, they start to think, why am I even here? I am so not kidding about the simple discipline of looking at somebody and communicating with your eyes, you matter to me, you are valued by me. Look them in the eyes and smile. And I want you to be the kind of person, not awkward, like Gawker, like weird. Like there's an appropriate amount of time to engage. Don't go beyond the weird, like, it's weird. Don't be weird. Be normal. Be normal. But what I'm talking about is most people, when people feel unworthy, they don't even feel like you should touch me. If I'm so filled with guilt and shame, I don't even feel like I'm worth touching. So what I'm talking about is a hug, a high five, or a handshake. What I'm talking about is I am literally going to step into your world, and with my physical presence, I'm going to say, you have value to me. You have no idea what a simple physical touch could be. A touch on the shoulder, just, I'm so glad you're here today. A hug, a high five. But what you got to do with your teams is, how much are you getting in the attitude of looking each other in the eyes and smiling? How much are you getting in the habit of speaking life over each other? How much are you getting in the habit of touching each other appropriately? But I'm telling you, when you can create an attitude of expectation, an atmosphere filled with engagement, people are going to walk in this place and they're going to be changed. The last thing I'll give you about this miracle here is, where did it happen? In the parking lot. Acts chapter 3, the paralytic jumps to his feet and he's healed. And the miracle didn't happen in the Holy of Holies. It was in the parking lot. The miracles can happen just out there as much as they can in here. Because the reality is, if you don't do out there what you do out there, the people in here can't do what they do in here. And if they don't do what they do in here, you can't do what you do out there. Everything is needed. So they drive on the campus. They're engaged by the parking team. They're met by the greeters and the VIP teams. They're engaged. Their defenses are going down. They're feeling loved and welcomed. They come in here, and the baton is handed to the ushers. The usher put them in this amazing seat. Their defenses are down. The music starts to thump. Their heart starts to beat inside their chest. Now they're starting to sing, and their tears are welling up as they're like, I don't even know what this is, but something's happening inside of me. And then you got Pastor Rick up here passionately preaching the gospel. And he's talking about Jesus Christ, crucified, died, and buried, risen again for the forgiveness of sins. He died for you because he loves you. And in that moment, my sister, your person, whoever it is who's far from God, has everything that's been wrong made right in a moment, because Jesus is risen high above their life. And in that moment, they stand, they get in the aisle, and they come down here, and they kneel, and they give their life to Christ. And what you got to understand is, every single part in that process was needed. And if any one of those things fall off the wagon, the whole wagon fails. So when you show up and serve, is it from a one-day place or another day? How can you get yourself preached up, praised up, before you ever walk in this place and you start jumping around like, oh yeah, be that person. Somebody's going to get changed. I know Sammy is. Like, somebody's going to get changed. He's bouncing all over the place. But you know why I love it? It's the most genuine thing in the world, because he has not given up on believing God can change anybody. And when you, with your salty attitude, walk around this place, it means you've given up on God really changing anybody. And the person to your right or to your left is going to love you too much to let you stay like that. Because somebody's sister needs it, somebody's brother needs it, and God expects it from you. And you're capable of it. Because when the calling is significant, there's nothing insignificant. What you do matters. It's all about somebody's one day. Let's understand the part we play, because the thing we're a part of is so much bigger than the individual part I play. And every single one of those 50,000 lives that are changed, you were a part of their story.